Welcome to All Four Downs podcast. I am Joe McGuire. Obi Moniz will join us in just a moment. Another wild week of college football. Much like I said, Oklahoma did what Oklahoma does in these big moments. Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State remain in the CFP top four. Coming up in second down, Ovi will compare his top 25 to the actual top 25. And then in third down, we will preview some of the there's so many great games coming up this weekend. Of course, we'll spend some time talking about the Pac-12 as well as the Big Ten. Still a scandal going on in the Big Ten. We'll get into that a little bit. And then in the final whistle, we'll discuss the robbery that is occurring right now with James Madison University. But boy, oh boy, Ovi, just another awesome week of college football. And I'll tell you, the number one thing that stood out to me this weekend, clearly the best team in this country, is your Georgia Bulldogs.
I believe so. I mean, they went against a number 12 team in the top 25 that was voted by the College Football Committee. A big win, yet they didn't get that push to be the top team in the nation.
It's crazy because Ohio State struggled again against a poor Rutgers team, that was in this game to the bitter end. Now, again, I've said this all year. Look, Ovi, Georgia's not winning like they won the last 2 years. We know this.
But in that defense, right? Like you said many weeks ago.
Oh, absolutely. They put so many guys in the NFL. They've shed so much talent, and yet week in, week out, there's not even a moment. And again, you're a Georgia Bulldogs fan. I am not.
Right.
You're
an Alabama fan. True to that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not been a moment in a game this season that I've watched where I thought Georgia might lose this game. Some of them have been close. Mm-hmm. There's never been a moment where I've honestly thought, ooh, I don't know. Is Georgia going to? Of course they're going to pull it out. They're so much better than everybody else. And what you saw from Ohio State this weekend, to me, clearly indicates what we've been saying is right. I know Trevor Keys, I'm sure he's going to key in tonight, and he accused us of being biased.
Wow.
You're a Georgia Bulldogs fan. No, maybe.
I'm being biased?
Maybe, because you're a Georgia fan. And listen, I don't agree with that, Ovi, but that's the argument he's making. But when he says it to me, and I'm like, dude, I'm not a Georgia fan. I hate Georgia football. But I've got eyes, and I watch week in and week out. That is the best college football team in the country. And the second team isn't even close. Plain and simple.
And in defense, and the Keys brothers, if you're tuning in, ask yourself how many football players have left Ohio State compared to Georgia in the last 2 to 3 seasons. And yet the program continues to win. And yet their winning streak is still on the rise. Do you look at the players that they have, or do you look at the organization and the head coach and the staff and say, you know what? That coaching staff, they definitely got it going on. That they know how to coach, they know how to mentor, maybe not outside the field, but in the game, they know what they're doing, and that's why they're still contenders, not pretenders.
By the way, Alabama would squash Ohio State, Michigan, and Florida State. They could play any two of those teams in the same weekend, and Alabama would still win the football game. The quality of the SEC is so much greater than what's going on in the Big Ten. And again, you take Ohio State and Michigan out of the equation, and you're talking about Conference USA. You're not talking about a Power 5 conference if you don't have Ohio State and Michigan.
Right.
And you and I discussed this just before the show. Michigan's getting a lot of flack, not only for the scandal, but for their weak strength of schedule. It's 111th. Ohio State's playing virtually the same schedule, except for that they played Notre Dame, a Notre Dame team. Obi, I think you'll agree, it's not that good this year.
No, Big Ten is not that great. The only two teams, the only two schools in the Big Ten is Ohio State and Michigan. And even that, I have to put a question mark on it. Now, Ohio State is a great football team. Don't get me wrong. They got the talent, they recruit well and everything else. But why do you think that the Big Ten had to convince USC, UCLA to come over and they were the first two schools from the Pac-12 to come over to the Big Ten for next season? Why is that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Look at the West Division. And like I said, we're going to cover all that. Okay. And I don't want to jump the gun just yet. Okay. But I want you to do some comparison for me. Okay. Look at this. Let's compare Georgia and Ohio State. Now, you want to talk to me about bias. Mizzou is ranked number 12. They are respected for their defense and their high-power offense as well. And yet they went against Georgia. As you can see, by halftime, it was 10-10. Can we say the same thing for Ohio State against Rutgers' team, that which Ohio State has beaten 9 in a row, blasted them, okay? Rutgers, not a great football team, and yet Rutgers was in the lead 9-7. How did they turn things around? And I can always go back to Sports Illustrated's article about 2018 and 2019 scandal that no one wants to talk about Ohio State, also part of a scandal themselves, stealing signs. No one's talking about it. But of course, we have to talk about Michigan and Jim Harbaugh and everything else. Let me tell you something. Please don't tell me that I'm biased. Please don't tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about college football when I have the stats and data every week and telling you why they should be number one. And middle of the season, I did have Georgia at number 2.
You did.
And then when they went and defeated a ranked team, and then you had to tell me, Joe.
Yes.
Did you notice? Did you notice how many players?
I had to scold you on your penalizing Georgia. And not for nothing. Not for nothing. If you were biased, last week, you probably would have said, and I know you put your money on Army.
Yes.
You knew Army was gonna beat Navy. You knew it. I didn't think so. I didn't think there was a chance in hell. But you didn't say that on the show. You decided you didn't want to show any bias by saying something crazy like Army was going to win.
Yeah.
And of course, Army won and won again.
And Army wins 23. Well, the score was surprising.
23-3?
23-3 was the final score. As you look at the second half, nobody scored anything. They went to old school football. Okay. And the biggest thing about this is that when Army beats Navy, they are the ones that are going to put their names on that trophy and win the Commander's Cup. That's exactly what's going to happen on the Army-Navy football game. That's going to be happening in December. And yes, they knocked out Air Force. And everyone was talking about Air Force. And I said, did anybody look at Army? And I know they're 3-6 right now, but they have played great teams, probably a harder schedule than Michigan and Ohio State. But hey, let's move on. Let's talk about teams with a great schedule like Washington and USC. I've been dogging the Pac-12 since we started this podcast about how weak they are and everything else. But we got to understand that all these quarterbacks came from the SEC. They came from the Big 12. They came from the Big 10. The ones that didn't have, they were not able to start, or they did, and all these coaches changing and everything else, and they drifted to the Pac-12, and they're making something happening right now. And you look at Washington and USC game, 52-42. That was a good game. No defense. And the team that everyone said Washington had the best defense at that time, the first 5 weeks, and you look at them now, do they really have the best defense?
No, but you know what? That offense makes up for it.
But that will pay the price when you go against
Absolutely.
a team
Listen.
like Georgia, like Alabama, that
Oh,
they
100%.
invest in the defense.
So listen, last week, I said to somebody, talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. I said the Kansas City Chiefs don't have a great defense. And the person challenged me and they were like, they're pretty good. And Myron Metcalf on the radio over the weekend said something that I thought was spot on. He said it's not a great defense, but it is opportunistic and it is a scoring defense.
I
And
believe that because Steve Spagnuolo,
sometimes,
who was the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, took the Giants, and the Giants won big because of their defense.
yeah,
Right?
oh yeah,
Yeah, and Bellammy left as offense coordinator to jump over to Washington, but that offense is not the same dominance as they were the last 2-3 years. They're not scoring 30, 40 points. They're barely not surviving because they have that defense.
that defense comes up big in big moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Washington defense, when it needed to against Caleb Williams, they came through and they were able to win this football game. Now, again, listen, in the college playoffs, that's not going to work.
Right. And you mentioned about Caleb Williams, and you see in the upper right-hand corner, you see him crying with his parents, with his mom and everything else. And I said to myself, why are you crying? You're the one that made that decision to follow Lincoln Riley to USC. You jumped the bandwagon. And then somebody on Twitter responded to me and be like, do you think it would have been different if you would have stayed at Oklahoma? Right. And I said, yes, it would have, because you brought a head coach that's defensive minded.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He could have hired a quarterback coach that could have done the same thing Lincoln Riley was doing. Right. And be able to perform. And Oklahoma won't be where they're at right now. They will probably be undefeated. And you look at the other star quarterbacks that served under Lincoln Riley, they don't have a playoff win.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, Lincoln Riley has 0 playoff wins. He's 1-4 overall in the bowl games. And that one win was against Florida when Florida had all their starters set out because they were supposedly getting ready for the NFL.
Yeah.
Okay. And on top of that,
Kyle Pitts hasn't done anything since a week before that game.
Right. Dylan Johnson. And you mentioned about was it Michael Penix, right?
Yep.
The Washington quarterback, but he wasn't really the show. It was Dylan Johnson, the running back, who 26 rushes, 256 yards with 4 touchdowns. That's amazing. And look what he did against Oregon: 20 carries for 100 yards and 1 touchdown. There is a difference. Okay. And then on top of that, USC ends up firing their defensive coordinator. Okay. I'm sorry. You waited till now to fire this guy. You couldn't fire him from the very beginning. I mean, look, you're ranked 129. There's only 130 teams in college football. I just want to let you know there. Okay. Yeah. Ranked 129. The only team worse than them is UMass.
And UMass is possibly the worst college football program in the nation.
UConn is looking better right now.
UConn's one of the worst programs in the nation. Yeah, look,
UConn might get a win against USC the way that defense plays.
Yeah, listen, this is look, they should have dropped the Grinch a long time ago.
Yeah, they should have.
The problem is this is Lincoln Riley's homeboy. It's his friend.
Nah.
And
friends, hey, there's a difference between friends and there's a difference between business. And if I'm paying you millions of dollars to head coach and take me to the promised land, then you got
three losses, 5 of the last 6 games, giving up more than 40 points. You could be my blood brother. You're out.
Yeah. On the other side, let me ask you this. Do you give Texas a pass for what happened against Kansas State this past Saturday? They had the lead and allowed Kansas State to tie the game.
Yeah.
And went to overtime.
Well, I'll tell you, too, Kansas State in that fourth quarter had a big chance to pull ahead in this game. They went for it on fourth down, and they failed. And had they done that, had they not failed there, Texas would have been donezo in this game. So Texas got super lucky in this game. I thought for sure Kansas State had it in the bag because, again, this is Texas and Oklahoma. Put them in a big spot, give them a big game, they generally blow it.
Yeah, this is the game that Texas could have blown it. Then they would have been out of the top 10. And then we would have been talking about Alabama squeezing in for the college football playoffs. That's exactly what we'll be talking about right now. The remaining schedules against TCU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. Iowa State lost this past weekend, so they're pretty much out of contention there. And then Texas Tech is a spoiler alert because you never know what you're going to get against those Red Raiders.
Absolutely.
But they had you believe Malik Murphy, this is, and I purposely did this, right? The Fox network, everyone was jumping on his bandwagon, trying to beef up Malik Murphy as the best quarterback that Texas has, right? They're trying to compare the 90s with the USC quarterbacks, okay? With Matt Leinart, Matt Castle, I'm sorry, 2003 and 2004. And I'm saying to myself, did you just watch this game? Yeah. Did Murphy perform like he was back in the days like USC? No, absolutely not. And yet they didn't give a chance for Manning to get some snaps and see if he is the guy. I don't understand how he's number 3, which I would have picked him at number 2 right now because Murphy's not that good.
Yeah. Interesting take by the Fox crew.
Yeah. But we were supposed to be coming back this upcoming game against TCU for Veterans Day. So let's see if that happens. But if not, will Murphy continue as a quarterback? And if so, I will say that's an opportunity for TCU to play spoiler alert.
Yep.
Absolutely. Moving on. Talking about Alabama earlier, Alabama beat LSU 42-28. Jalen Milroe rushed 4 touchdowns. And I got to say that he is probably he could get the most improved award from the way he played in week 1 to get benched on week 2 to come back in week 3 and continuously working hard to get where he at. I could tell you this. He is not a passer. He's a runner. And that's also a problem from Alabama because he's not like Tua Tagovailoa. He's not like Jalen Hurts, that they're able to do both things. Yep. Milroe's strength is running the ball. And how long can you do that? Because once you stop him, that's when Alabama's vulnerable.
Well, he looked outstanding this week. And I'm glad you said that because as I was watching him run for all those touchdowns, I thought to myself, this is Jalen Milroe at his best. This is how you're going to get the most out of this guy. You got a pretty good offensive line. You've got a pretty talented offense. You get this guy going. You get this guy running like he was doing against a good LSU team, and really wasn't close.
And if they don't stop him, the Crimson Tides could go all the way. They can.
I would still insist, Ovi, to me, Alabama is probably the second or third best team in the country.
I won't push it there that much. Not yet. Alabama still has a lot to prove. They really do. They still got a lot to prove. Can he be consistent? We know he's getting better, but can he still be consistent throughout the weeks? Okay. On the other side, you see LSU. Their star quarterback went down. Daniels. They didn't put him back in the game. For somebody, I think they had to do concussion protocol.
Yeah.
And they tried to get him back. They had to call him back in and never came out. And that's why I say he got KO'd from the start, because even if he was there was no difference maker on this score. It was still going to be 42-28 because that Alabama defense was locked solid in the second half. They only allowed 1 touchdown. And even when Daniels was there, they weren't getting first downs. And the good for him to get
I like
Go
Jaden
ahead.
Daniels a lot. That he's a very talented young man. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. But you're right. This
Mhm.
Alabama team was overwhelming. They were much better than
They were ready.
LSU.
It was
Yeah,
like,
they
yeah,
were
we
very,
lost
very
last
ready.
year, but we're not losing this year. Right. But speaking about losing, Oklahoma, bye-bye. Oklahoma State is taking over the Big 12 with Texas. And what a big disappointment because Oklahoma played so well against Texas. And they just on after that game, they're on a decline. Like, I don't know if they thought they were above everybody. But this is not a great look. And this is the last game of their rivalry because Oklahoma's going to the SEC. And I feel sorry for Oklahoma, but if you do that, you're going to get buried in the SEC like Vanderbilt.
Yeah. I don't think
Absolutely.
it's going to be quite that bad, but yeah, I think, it's one of these things where be careful what you wish for. You go
Hmm.
from the Big 12 to the SEC. You're not going to be one of the big dogs anymore. You're going to be a middle of the pack dog, and you're going to have to hope every couple of years you get a good quarterback, and maybe you
Hmm.
can compete in the SEC. But I, I don't
I
know.
would take Texas over Oklahoma because of the
Yeah,
fact that Sarkisian is the head coach and he knows how SEC is played. And
that
then
was a
another
very,
team,
very Oklahoma thing to do this
yeah.
week.
And another team to say goodbye to is Notre Dame because as much as I try to defend that team, they had their quarterback, and I don't know what happened with the coach, the staff. They're at a loss. This is not the same team that was rolling in, executing everything, and they're just falling apart. Sam Hartman is a talented quarterback. I still believe he's going to do wonders in the NFL, but I just don't know what happened. Clemson fired up because their own people are dissing them, and they made a statement saying, no, you know, we know that the dynasty is gone, but we are still a legit competitive team. And Clemson showed up.
I said that last week. Look, this team, the dynasty's over, and that's fine. Dynasties are a special thing, and they don't last forever. Okay. That said, they're still one of the top programs in the country. And Notre Dame, I'm sorry to say this, I think they really need to rethink coaching at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I think that's one of their bigger problems.
It's his second season. I give it a pass. Let's look at the third. The third should be better than before, right? Maybe Brian Kelly saw something that's why he just decided to leave. Everyone was hating on him because he left Notre Dame to jump to LSU, but he saw something that he probably didn't have he knew that he wasn't going to get to the promised land with Notre Dame as best as he did his job there because he took them to the playoffs, didn't succeed, but he thought he had a better chance, with LSU. But yeah, you're
I'll
right.
be honest.
That coaching staff needs
I
some help.
I think Brian Kelly was more into those SEC dollars because again, you come into the SEC,
Mm-hmm.
nothing's guaranteed, right? I mean, he took over an LSU team that was one of the best in the country, and they've slowly but surely leveled off. And every week we got to look at that stupid Brian Kelly face. He's very confused as to what's going on. You can't mess around.
You notice that when they're losing, that he has that face expression. Do I need to put it up again?
Please do.
Hold on. Put it on. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, here it is. Here it is. This is that look.
I love it.
Every time that they're losing is that look. But when they're winning, it's just fabulous. It's just fabulous because you get that pump reaction. He look like he's a teenager again. But I'm just saying, like, something's got to give, and now with all these teams transitioning to different conferences, there's going to be a big shake up again with the coaches. One thing that's not going to be shooken up is for Arizona. Arizona won 27-10, and look where Arizona's at. And I put Drake's picture in there because I like this song. Started from the bottom, now I'm here. All right. Arizona did start from the bottom. And look, they're climbing up. And with only 2 losses in that conference, they still got a better shot to make it to the Pac-12 championship should Oregon lose.
Yeah. That's a big
Okay.
if, but yeah, it's a good spot to
Yeah,
be in if you're Zona.
absolutely. As far as UCLA, I'm messing up. UCLA. I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, they also had an opportunity, and every time they are ranked in position to do something, Chip Kelly always finds a way to choke himself.
Yep.
He chips away. I think that's
That's
why
a
that's his name is
UCLA
Chip.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Big Ten championship is a bye week, and the reason why I say that is because there's nothing going on great for the West. Now, the top 20, the college football committee has Iowa ranked. Why? I have no idea why they're ranked because they can't even score. They can't score.
Bad.
I thought you were supposed to pick the best top 25 teams in the country. I'm sorry. Iowa is not. Iowa's averaging 8.75 points within the last 3 games. 8.75. How is that a top 25 team? Okay. Wisconsin shooting themselves in the foot. They're 3-3.
Mhm.
Minnesota. I mean, come on. You mean to tell me that if the season ends right now, Iowa has a big chance against either Michigan or Ohio State?
It's a joke. That's a
It
joke.
is.
The
You might as
West
well
is a
just combine
West is a
everybody.
joke. Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Not for nothing. Look,
Big 12
Nebraska.
does it.
Nebraska. You think about how great Nebraska used to be as a program, that back to the Tom Osborne days. Most
Even
of
in
my
the
life.
90s.
Sure. I mean, Nebraska's you look at the teams in the West and you got to ask yourself, how broken is Nebraska?
It's well, hey, they got a new head coach this year, right?
Yep.
Um,
Same old though.
yeah, but I mean, look, he took Baylor to the promised land,
Yep.
right? I mean, politics, of course, got in there to where they couldn't go to the college football playoffs. He ends up going to Carolina in the NFL. That didn't go through. I think he is best to be a great and awesome head coach in college football. You got to give that guy time, especially with recruiting and everything else. Maybe get used to the Neil and the the transfer protocol and all that stuff. I think with Nebraska will get to where they need to be. I'm not worried about that.
I agree with you. I'm sure they will. And he's an excellent coach. And I feel like he's the right guy for the job. But again, you look at how weak the West is in the Big Ten. And Nebraska had everything going for it. And they're 5-4, 3-3 in the conference.
I'm sorry, Matt Rule. Matt Rule, that's his name. Yep. There you go.
It's sad.
Yeah. All right, college football playoffs. Top 25 was announced earlier in the day. And let's compare because what they have is Arizona, Iowa, Tulane, North Carolina, Kansas State. Totally respect that, but you got to give more props to Tulane because I've had them. They're up in my rankings. As far as Iowa, that's a big joke. I'm sorry. But I'm glad that the committee put Arizona at 21. We will talk about them later. But as far as for me, Notre Dame should either be between 21 and 25 or they should have been out for the way they lost. Oklahoma losing and LSU should have been out. But being that they were higher ranked, they dropped a lot down to 23. And North Carolina, I do agree. They're bouncing back. They got their victory, but for how long? Who knows? I still think that North Carolina missed their opportunity and they will not make it to the SEC championship. Mizzou lost to Georgia. It is what it is. It's just what was expected. 16-20, Kansas, Oklahoma, Utah, LSU, and Notre Dame. Notice that LSU and Notre Dame together, but I have them together strictly in the bottom.
Yeah.
Utah, we both agreed at 18. That's pretty awesome. Oklahoma State at 19, Oregon State. They're 7-2. I'm still questionable about Oregon State because, man, that'll be a big matchup, the last game of the season between them and Oregon. So I can't wait. 11-15. I have Liberty at 12, and they're probably in the same boat as James Madison because they changed. They this is their first year in Conference USA, but they've been winning for the last 2 seasons,
Yep.
and yet they don't get any respect. Okay. Penn State, I still feel is a joke, and I will shut up if they beat Michigan this Saturday. I would. I will appraise them and I'll tell them, okay, great job. Thank you. You probably did the country a favor to knock off Michigan, but I still don't think they got enough to beat them, whether they cheating or not cheating. And that's why I have Tulane at number 13. All right. Give some love to Toledo. Why not? Okay. American Conference, they're doing a good job. SMU, they're representing. You got to give that respect, but they're not. But instead, all right, you got Oklahoma State. I got them. All right, Oregon State. Yeah, they're up there. But that's it. Louisville. Let's talk about Louisville. I still think Louisville is a top 10 team. I really do. They're on the chase. If they win out, they're in the ACC championship to go against Florida State. And then everything else is still the same because I do still have Texas and Alabama and Ole Miss. So the top 9, similar teams, but again, how are you deciding who is the number 1 team? Okay. I have Georgia, Florida State, Ohio State, and Michigan, those 4. Okay. Granted, I know Michigan made it to the college football playoffs last year, but that was last year. This year, I have to give the credit to the resume that they're talking about, as of Ohio State being just a slightly better than Michigan because of strength of schedule. But you can't tell me that Ohio State is better than Florida State, which that offense of Florida State is spectacular. I still think that if they were played against each other, it'll be neck to neck, and it'll be who will have the ball last. I really do think so. But I still think that Ohio State has a habit of having a slow start. They might have that spark in the third quarter, and who knows how they're going to finish. And then again, Georgia, you've mentioned it before. Look, they're 2-time defending champions. Let them earn that loss to get out of number 1.
Yes. Yes. I don't understand the disrespect for a team that's done nothing but win.
And it's not about the players. So hear me out. It's not about the players. You have to look at the coaches, the preparation. Okay. They could have lost a couple of times this season, but they persevered and they're making it happen. Why? Kirby Smart got that team on lock. So are you going to be like, oh, they don't have this player and that player? Well, guess what? Georgia's full of injuries. And then if you watch the game, the last 2 games, we lost our top stars, okay, to include our tight end, to include 2 defensive linemen, okay, and yet we'll still be able to put anyone in there and still hassle those quarterbacks. So I'm just throwing it out there, okay, but that's okay, because this week, again, we're going to see a great Georgia football team compared to Ohio State, and maybe next week the committee might change their mind. All right. So we're going to move on to third down. Sports betting. Here we go. And we're going to start off with that first game, and that will be Ole Miss versus Georgia. Now, Ole Miss lost to Alabama, but yeah, that is their only loss. And I told you that I don't respect or I don't trust Kiffin, because they have a better team than Alabama. They really do. But this is a preview of an SEC championship. This is like practice for Georgia. This is make it or break it for Georgia, because Ole Miss does have an awesome offense, okay? And they do have that defense. But Georgia, very talented. You know me, I'm going to go for my Georgia Bulldogs. Who you got?
Yeah, Georgia at home. Give me a break. I know you like Ole Miss. You've been on them all year. You mentioned their only loss to Alabama. Georgia would beat Alabama. I think Georgia, to me, is the only team in the country I 100% believe is better than Alabama. Okay. Ole Miss isn't going to do this. The Ole Miss isn't going to win this football game. Just it's not going to happen.
Jackson Dart, I don't trust him as a quarterback in a sense when it comes to a game like this because he finds a way through to turn over the ball. Carson Beck has been battle tested, and I think he'll do a good job. Other tight ends stepped
Real
up
quick.
besides Bowers being injured.
Yeah. How
you
about
know?
that? Listen,
Yeah.
again, you look at the depth on this team. You mentioned Jalen Milroe and how he's improved so much from the beginning of the season till now.
Mhm.
I think Carson Beck has gotten he's closing in on superstar level at this point. You want to talk about a guy who I was uncertain of, and I told you earlier in the year, I don't know, man. You just pop a quarterback in and think everything's going to be all right. Well, at Georgia, you can do that. And he's figured things out. He's improved every week, and this isn't where he's going to lose a football game.
Hey, they're favoring Georgia 10.5 in this game. So that's big. That's big numbers in the SEC.
I feel like they're trying to be as respectful as they can to Ole Miss with that 10.5.
Michigan State versus Ohio State. And purposely I put that there is because I want to hear your reactions. Ohio State's favorite 31.5 points against Michigan State.
I don't know that Ohio State will cover that. That said, Michigan State is an actual living dumpster fire.
Oh, yeah.
Things couldn't be going any worse in Lansing. It's not good. It's not good at all. I don't know that Ohio State wins by 30, though. Not the way they've been playing. You mentioned
they have to beat them. They have to beat them over that point because Michigan shut them down 49-0.
Yeah.
So if Ohio State can't shut them out,
that's not gonna happen this week, guaranteed.
Okay, you're saying that they won't make the cut.
I'm saying Ohio State will win this game by 3 touchdowns.
Okay,
not more than that. And again, I think you got a game that will be uncomfortably close for longer than it needs to be.
And it shouldn't be.
You're right. It shouldn't be, but it will.
All right, Michigan versus Penn State. This is probably this might be the game of the week. I don't know, depending how they look at this. But this is going to be the most watched game.
It'll be the game of the week
and everything else.
Yes, it'll be the game of the week if Penn State doesn't get blown out by 35 points. And I can't guarantee that won't happen.
I'll tell you what. If Penn State was to lose this game, you might as well drop them in the 20s because, again, Penn State is the third best team in the Big Ten. You only talk about Michigan or Ohio State, and that's it.
They'll get blown out by Michigan, and it will go to prove what I've been saying, that the talent gap between Ohio State and Michigan is enormous till you get to the third best team in the Big Ten in Penn State. And then after Penn State, it's a huge drop to the next team.
You might as well go to a different conference.
You might as well be Conference USA at that point.
Michigan's favorite 4.5. That's the lowest margin in their schedule. Everything else has been 30 plus. Just throwing it out there. All right, Miami versus Florida State. I laugh at this because I've seen Miami blow a game in which they were supposed to kneel down and they didn't do it. And I think if I'm mistaken, that was against Georgia Tech, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Georgia Tech, they lost 23-20, which should have never happened. But Van Dyke is not the guy that's very proficient at quarterback. And yeah, he is from Glastonbury, Connecticut. But man, he is not representing like I thought he would. They lost to North Carolina State 20-6. And if you lose to North Carolina State, you might as well wrap it up because Florida State is not only going to beat you, the spread is 14.5. They're going to win by 28 points against Miami.
I think this one's going to come down to the wire. This is a big rivalry game here.
It's not a rivalry.
And
Don't kid yourself.
it's a
It could be a
rivalry.
rivalry if Miami's coach could coach right, make proper decisions, and if their record only had one loss, then
Yeah.
I'd be like, you know what, this is the most watched game, but it's not.
It's the reason why Florida State will win the game. I don't think Florida State's going to cover. I think this game's going to be close. I think Miami's going to have the game of their lives and still come up short because
Okay,
the talent gap is that big.
listen, they went to overtime with Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
They went to overtime with Virginia,
Oh, yeah.
and then they lose to North Carolina State. That's 3
Yeah.
weeks in a row.
Yeah.
We could take it back to where they lost to North Carolina 41-31.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest joke of them all against Georgia Tech. So
Yeah.
technically, they could have been in a 5-game losing streak right now, but they're not.
Yes.
You know? But Florida State got a defense.
Yes.
And they played very well against every team. They beat Pittsburgh 24-7 at Pittsburgh. They're going home. This is a home game.
Yes.
Florida State got this by a
I
lot.
love it. I love it. I love everything about this game. That said, and I think Florida State will win the game. I just think for some reason, it's just a weird feeling I have, Ovi. This game will be tight until the end. I think Florida State still wins.
So let me ask you this. Do you think they have a possibility of doing an upset in this game since the committee has them at number 4?
No.
Is their eye test? Well, they must be blind. So, yeah. Anyways, we're moving on. I don't even want to touch that subject. But another game that's awesome is Utah versus Washington. Man, I love this upset. I call me crazy, but Utah's been flirting in the wrong direction and they're winning, but this is a defensive type of team. And Barnes has been playing hardcore, and it reminds me of last year's TCU with Maxon Duggan, right? The quarterback. This guy hustles, and he's giving his all, and I love his spirit. And because of that, and you can't measure spirit, you cannot measure the adrenaline, right? You always go by stats and everything else. This guy's a game changer. And I got a feeling, and being that it's 9.5-point spread, I am going for Utah plus 9.5.
This game's going to end with Utah missing a field goal. It's going to be a great game. There's going to be some scoring in this game. Not like you saw last week with USC. That's not going to be that crazy.
It ain't going to be that. Ain't no 90 points in this game.
You're definitely going to see much better defense this week. But I think Utah's defense is better than Washington's defense right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to come down to the wire. And I think Utah's going to blow it. I like your idea of an upset. And I was very tempted. And if this game was in Utah, I'd be saying some different things right now.
Well, I mean, I think it's 9.5 is a little bit too much for the caliber of this game.
I
agree. I'm picturing in my head someone's going to win by 3. Either way.
Yeah.
3, I'm still winning with Utah 9.5.
I think this is going to be this game is going to go right down to the wire, and it's going to be an awesome game, and the game's going to end in absolute heartbreak for somebody.
It'll be a heartbreaker for Washington because they're outside looking in for that college football playoffs. And we're wanting that rematch with Washington and Oregon. But every time we want something, it just never happens.
That is true.
And then we're left with what if, right?
You remember earlier in the year when we talked about the Pac-12, I think I even did it in my final whistle. I talked about, look, these teams are really good. There's so many good quarterbacks. The offenses are really great. And the problem with the Pac-12, this happens almost every year. There's 5 or 6 pretty good teams. And by the time all is said and done, everyone's lost 2 or 3 times.
Because they're beating each other up.
They're beating the crap out of each other, and they're fantastic games.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the
Every
games
year
that you
this
want to watch
happens.
in the bowl,
Oh
right? In the
God,
New
yeah.
Year's Six bowl. Absolutely.
I tell you right now, there's nothing I like better than waking up on a Sunday morning and someone's like, "Hey, did you see that Pac-12 game last night? Pick whoever, whichever game." And yes, they're all fire, and they play into the wee hours of the morning here on the East, and
Mhm.
it's worth it to stay up and watch some of the craziness that's been going on in the Pac-12.
Yeah, and it's speaking about another Pac-12 team, USC versus Oregon, another spectacular game that I can see this game scoring up to 90 points. And it's just something about playing against USC that you just drop the defense and say, hey, how far can I throw this ball? Right? It's more of a wide receiver game than anything else. But I still got a feeling Oregon is going to take this game. Being at Oregon, home field advantage, they got this game.
Yeah, I think Oregon will end up by the time this game is over, I think most of this game will be tight. It'll be close for into the third quarter, maybe even late into the third quarter. I think by the time middle of the fourth comes around, I think they'll be up 3 scores.
Ooh,
Um,
really?
not
That's
necessarily
fascinating.
not
No, 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 no,
necessarily 3
no.
touchdowns, but I think they'll
You're almost there
yeah.
because the spread is 16 and a half.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I'm almost thinking 16, 17 points. I think eventually Oregon pulls away. I just USC is just not good enough, and the defense is going to have a really hard time stopping Oregon.
When you lose to Notre Dame 48-20 and you were on the road, then you ended up losing at home to Washington 52-42. Yeah. Nah, I'm sorry. It's just not gonna happen. I will go for Oregon and the spread. I would.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Tennessee and Mizzou. The reason why I got this game, this is a must win for Tennessee because then they go and face Georgia the following week. So in this game, there's something about a curse. Tennessee whooped on UConn, University of Connecticut. For those of you that don't know that Connecticut has a football team, they did a lot of damage, but somehow, some way, the curse is on them because they don't function right after that game. North Carolina State done. Okay. They go with Tennessee, and I got a feeling that they didn't get nothing out of this game except for adding their resume. Like, look, this is how many yards I scored. Yay. All right. Mizzou pulls up an upset and beats Tennessee.
Oh, I'm with you. I got Mizzou winning this game. I think this is like a 24-17 Mizzou win.
Oh man. And the thing is they got them at 13 and 14. I know the numbers are not what's as expected because I snapshot this a long time ago. But they're both ranked 13 and 14 neck to neck. And therefore, I got Mizzou on this one. I really
Yep.
do. Mizzou coming off a loss against Georgia. I just don't see them the way they lost back-to-back losses like that. I don't see it.
I'm with you. Yeah, I like Mizzou, and I think they got a better defense than Tennessee. I think late in this game they come up with a big stop, and I think again they end up winning this game by 6
In
or 7 points.
comparison, watch this. In comparison, both these teams went on the road to Kentucky, and Mizzou played a lot better than Tennessee. So I got my money's on Mizzou. What was the spread? Oh, they're giving Tennessee -1 point.
Okay, yeah. So Vegas sees this as even. I again, I'm going to give it to Mizzou being home, and I
Yeah.
think just being a little bit better.
West Virginia versus Oklahoma. Why are we still talking about them? Because this is an important game for both these teams because the winner gets closer to the Big 12 championship. And right now, Oklahoma State and Texas are there, but both those teams are vulnerable to lose a game. All right. So that's why this game is important. Oklahoma bounces back and they're going to win this game.
boy, things are just going to get worse for Lincoln Riley here as they drop to 7-3 and 4-3 in the Big 12 and watch West Virginia position themselves.
I gotta correct you there, my friend.
Do it.
Lincoln Riley doesn't coach Oklahoma.
He should.
Why?
The biggest mistake of his life.
Brent Venables is the head coach. Yeah. Okay.
And I like him too. I like him too.
This is a home game. That's why I'm picking Oklahoma.
I don't care. Listen, there's every reason to pick Oklahoma here. It makes all the sense in the world. But just like last week, when I told you they were going to lose, they're still in a pretty good spot, which is exactly why they're going to lose again.
Oh, man. I don't know. This is a stinger, man. And Oklahoma's lost 2 in a row. You think they'll make it 3 in a row?
I do.
Wow.
I do. And not for nothing. Think about last year. They were 6-0. How'd they end the season? 6-6. They lost 6 in a row. Now, mind you, Dylan Gabriel got hurt. Not the case here, but Oklahoma can lose games that they're supposed to win. It's what Oklahoma football does.
Well, they lost to West Virginia last year, 23-20, but that was at West Virginia.
Yeah.
They're coming home.
Yeah. That's good.
And yes, they did lose 3 of the last. Well, actually, they lost 4 of the last 5 games. And that was to include the Cheez-It Bowl at the end when they lost to Florida State.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I will hate. You might be right. I agree with you. But being at home,
bro,
I think it changes the narrative.
I 100% understand why you think Oklahoma should win. And again, I looked at this and I thought, yeah, Oklahoma's got this. And then I thought more about it and I'm like, this is just the kind of game. They're still alive. Can still make a run here in the Big 12.
Yeah.
It's exactly the reason they're going to come up short this week.
All right.
Because that's what Oklahoma football does.
We got 2 more games.
I hate it, but it's facts.
All right, 2 more games. All right, Alabama versus Kentucky. I got Alabama on this.
Yes.
I don't think it's if Georgia could go over Kentucky, Alabama, but I'm curious to see how well Milroe could run over Kentucky. They do have a defense. Let's see. Let's test it out. If he could perform like he did last week, Alabama's knocking on the door and say, hey, open the door for me because we deserve to be in the college football. And Rutgers versus Iowa. If Rutgers win, we're going to have a tiebreaker in the Big Ten West with first place being 4-3.
Yeah.
All right. So who you got?
I'm going to take Iowa.
Oh, righty then.
12-10 is the final score.
I got you better. You ready?
Yep.
I'm picking 6-3 Rutgers.
I will give you $100 cash if the final score is 6-3 Rutgers.
You said it here on All 4 Downs podcast. $100, 6-3 final score in Iowa. And Iowa gets eliminated to even go to a bye week practice squad against either Ohio State or Michigan.
Wouldn't you love to see Rutgers win that game, though? Seriously.
Absolutely. Let's make it worse. Yeah. All right, it is the final whistle. And once again, James Madison has been one hell of a team for the last 2 seasons. And you got something to get off your chest on that. So we'll conclude with that. Once again, thank you for watching All 4 Downs podcast. Please subscribe to our channel. Follow us. What do you think about these games? Who you got for week 11 of college football? Here you go.
Thanks, Ovi. So James Madison officials made a last-ditch plea attempt to the NCAA Division I Board of Directors, hoping to reduce its football program's FCS to FBS transition from 2 years to 1 year so that the undefeated Dukes would be eligible to compete in a postseason bowl game this season. In their letter to the NCAA Division I Board of Directors, the university president and athletic director argued that the Dukes have embarked on this transition in ways that no other institution has since the transition rules changed 23 years ago, and that their, quote, student athletes have achieved an astonishing, unprecedented level of success during that period. The Dukes, in their second season in the Sun Belt Conference, are 9-0 and ranked number 21 in the Associated Press and the coaches poll. Last week, the Dukes won their 12th game in a row, 42-14 at Georgia State. They're one of 7 unbeaten teams in the FBS. However, because James Madison is ineligible under NCAA rules to compete in the postseason, it is not included in the College Football Playoff Selection Committee rankings. If the Dukes were eligible to compete in a bowl this season, they'd probably end up being the highest ranked team from the group of 5 in the CFP rankings, and they would be in contention to play in a New Year's 6 bowl game. As it stands right now, the only way the Dukes can play in a bowl game is if there are not enough 6-6 teams to fill out the 82 spots in the 41 bowl games at the end of the regular season. Not only that, but the Dukes also aren't eligible to play in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game, despite being the only team that's still unbeaten in league play. For that matter, the Dukes are 15-3 against FBS competition over the past 2 seasons, and they're the only program to be ranked in the AP poll in each of the last 2 years while transitioning from the FCS to the FBS. Despite all that, NCAA will not budge at all. Because, it's all about the kids. Thank you for joining us for Wolverines. I am Joe McGuire. We'll catch you next week for All 4 Downs.